The door shouldn't have been open. Thomas Merrick stood in the yard with a bucket of well water in each hand, staring at the barn entrance swaying gently in the wind. He'd latched it himself before dawn. He always did. 15 years alone on this land had made him careful about small things. Locks, latches, silence. He set the buckets down slowly, water sloshing over the rim and darkening the dust at his feet. The barn was old, weathered gray by sun and storms, but it was his. Everything inside it was his. No one came out here anymore. Not since the town had decided he was the kind of man best left to himself. Thomas moved toward the door, boots crunching over dry earth. The wind carried the smell of hay and leather, and something else. Something that didn't belong. Soap, maybe, or fear. He pulled the door wider. The light fell in slow, and at first he saw nothing unusual. The horse stalls were empty as always. The workbench stood cluttered with tools he hadn't touched in weeks. But then his eyes caught movement in the corner, near the pile of old feed sacks. A woman. She was pressed against the wall, half hidden in shadow, her dress torn at the shoulder and streaked with dirt. Her hair hung loose and tangled, dark as creek water, and her eyes, wide, unblinking, fixed on him like a trapped animal watching the hunter decide. Thomas didn't move, didn't speak. She was young, maybe 25. Her hands were clasped in front of her, trembling, and there was a bruise blooming purple along her jaw. "I didn't steal nothing," she said, voice barely louder than the wind outside. Thomas let the silence stretch. He wasn't a man who filled Kong's space with words. He'd learned long ago that silence told you more than questions ever could. She shifted her weight, and he saw her wince. Pain in her ribs, maybe, or her leg. She'd been running, or hiding, or both. "How long you been here?" he asked finally, his voice low and rough from disuse. "Since last night." He glanced at the loft above. She could have been up there when he came in at dawn to check the tools. Could have been watching him the whole time. "You hurt?" She hesitated, then nodded once. Small, honest. Thomas exhaled through his nose and stepped back, giving her space. "Come out of there." She didn't move. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said, "but I need to see what I'm dealing with." Slowly, she stepped forward into the light. The dress was pale blue once, now stained and torn. Her feet were bare, cut and blistered. She'd walked a long way. "What's your name?" "Anna." "Anna what?" "Just Anna." He didn't push. People out here didn't always give their full names, and when they didn't, there was usually a reason. "Where'd you come from?" She looked past him toward the open door and the empty land beyond. "Doesn't matter, I can't go back." Thomas crossed his arms, studying her. There were 100 things she could be. A runaway wife, a thief, a liar. He'd seen plenty of drifters pass through over the years, each one carrying a story they didn't want to tell. But none of them had ever looked at him the way she was looking at him now, like he was the last door left to knock on. "You running from the law?" he asked. "No." "From a man?" Her jaw tightened, and that was answer enough. Thomas turned and walked to the workbench, picking up a canteen and tossing it to her. She caught it clumsily, then drank in long, desperate gulps. "You got family?" he asked, not looking at her. "No." "Friends?" "No." He nodded slowly, his back still to her. "Then you got a problem." She set the canteen down, wiping her mouth with the back of her hand. "I know." Thomas finally turned to face her again. "This land's mine, bought and paid for. I don't owe nobody nothing, and I don't take in strays." "I'm not asking for charity," she said, voice stronger now. "Let me stay. I'll work. I'll cook, clean, mend, whatever you need. I won't be a burden." "You already are." The words hung between them, blunt and cold. Anna lifted her chin. "Then I'll earn my place." Thomas almost smiled, but didn't. There was something in her, something stubborn and raw, that reminded him of himself a long time ago. "And when he comes looking for you?" Thomas asked. "Because he will. He won't find me." "You sure about that?" She wasn't. He could see it in the way her hands curled into fists at her sides. Thomas walked past her, heading for the door. "You can sleep in the loft tonight. Tomorrow you leave." "Wait." He stopped, hand on the doorframe. Anna stepped forward, her voice urgent now, almost desperate. Let me stay, and I'll give you a child one day. The words hit the air like a stone dropped into still water. Thomas turned slowly, his face unreadable. She didn't look away. I know what you are, a man alone. No wife, no family. I've seen men like you before. Good men who let the world decide they don't deserve softness. Her voice cracked, just barely. Let me stay. Let me prove I'm worth it. And one day, I'll give you what you lost. Thomas stared at her for a long moment, his heart doing something it hadn't done in years, beating too fast, too hard. He didn't ask how she knew. Maybe she'd heard talk in town. Maybe she'd just guessed. It didn't matter. That's not a trade, he said quietly. That's a life. I know. The wind pushed the door wider, and the evening light spilled gold across the barn floor. Thomas looked at her, really looked at her, and saw something he hadn't expected. Hope. He turned and walked out into the yard, leaving her standing there in the dim light of the barn. But he didn't tell her to leave. Section 1. Word count, 1,087 words. She was still there in the morning. Thomas woke before dawn, as always, and lay in the narrow bed staring at the ceiling beams. He could hear the faint creak of the loft floor above the barn. Small movements, careful and quiet. She was awake too. He rose, dressed, and walked out into the cool gray light. The sky was pale, the land still and colorless. He crossed the yard and stopped at the barn door, listening. Silence. He pushed it open. Anna was sitting on the edge of the loft, legs dangling, mending the tear in her dress with a piece of thread she must have found somewhere. Her hands moved slowly, precisely, and she didn't look up when he entered. Thought you'd be gone, Thomas said. I don't break my word. He grunted and moved to the workbench, picking up the axe. Then you're a fool. Maybe. Thomas turned the axe in his hands, testing the weight. I meant what I said. I don't take in strays. I'm not a stray. I'm a woman who made you an offer. He looked up at her then, and she met his gaze without flinching. That wasn't an offer, he said. That was desperation. Anna tied off the thread and bit it clean with her teeth. Maybe, but it's still true. Thomas set the axe down and crossed his arms. You don't know me. You don't know what kind of man I am. I know you didn't hurt me last night. I know you gave me water, and I know you didn't throw me out in the dark. She climbed down from the loft, landing lightly despite her injuries. That's enough. It's not. Then what do you want me to say? Her voice rose just slightly. That I'm running from a man who beat me near to death? That I walked 2 days through the desert with no food because I'd rather die out here than go back to him? She stepped closer, eyes bright and fierce. I'm not asking you to love me, Mr. Merrick. I'm asking you to let me live. Thomas said nothing. Anna took a breath, steadying herself. I'll stay out of your way. I'll work hard. And when the time comes, if the time comes, I'll give you a family, a son, a daughter, something to leave behind when you're gone. And if I say no, then I'll walk out that door and you'll never see me again. Her voice softened. But we'll both know you could have said yes. Thomas turned away, staring out at the empty land beyond the barn. He'd built this place with his own hands, cleared the rocks, dug the well, raised the fences. He'd done it alone because that's what the world had left him with. Alone. But Anna was right about one thing. He was tired of it. 3 months, he said finally, his back still to her. You stay 3 months. You work. You keep to yourself. And if he comes looking, you're gone before he gets here. And after 3 months, we see if you're still alive. Anna nodded slowly. Deal. Thomas walked past her without another word, heading for the house. But as he reached the door, he stopped and spoke over his shoulder. There's bread in the kitchen, and a dress that might fit in the trunk by the window. It was my sister's. Anna's breath caught, just barely. Thank you, she whispered. Thomas didn't answer. He just stepped inside and closed the door behind him. The days passed slowly at first. Anna worked without complaint. She cooked, cleaned, mended his shirts, and tended the small vegetable patch behind the house that had gone to seed years ago. She didn't talk much, and Thomas liked that. They moved around each other like two people in a careful dance, close but never touching. At night, she slept in the barn. Thomas didn't offer her the house, and she didn't ask. But sometimes when he woke in the dark, he could see the faint glow of a lantern through the barn window and knew she was awake too. On the eighth day, a rider came. Thomas was fixing a fence post when he saw the dust rising in the distance. He straightened, shading his eyes, and watched the figure approach. A man on a gray horse, riding slow and deliberate. Thomas walked back to the house and found Anna inside, kneading dough at the table. "Someone's coming." Her hand stopped moving. "You know him?" She wiped her hands on her apron and moved to the window, peering out carefully. Her face went pale. "That's him," she whispered. Thomas felt something cold settle in his chest. "The man you ran from?" She nodded. He looked out the window. The rider was closer now, maybe 200 yards. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a hat pulled low over his face. "What's his name?" "Caleb Marsh." Thomas knew the name. Everyone in 3 counties knew it. Marsh was a cattle buyer, a drinker, and a man with a temper that had left more than one person broken. "He know you're here?" "I don't know. Maybe he's just passing through." Thomas didn't think so. Men like Marsh didn't pass through. They hunted. "Stay inside," Thomas said. "Don't let him see you." Anna grabbed his arm. "He'll kill you if you get in his way." Thomas looked down at her hand on his sleeve, then back up at her face. "Then I guess we'll see what kind of man I am." He stepped outside and closed the door behind him. Caleb Marsh reined his horse to a stop 20 feet from the house. He sat tall in the saddle, eyes hidden beneath the brim of his hat. "Afternoon," Thomas said, voice flat. Marsh didn't answer right away. He just looked at the house, the barn, the yard, taking it all in. "You Merrick?" he asked finally. "I am. I'm looking for a woman, about this tall, dark hair, blue dress. You seen her?" Thomas crossed his arms. "No." Marsh smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You sure about that?" "I'm sure." The two men stared at each other, the air between them thick and heavy. Marsh leaned forward in the saddle. "She's mine, and if she's here, I'm taking her back." "There's no woman here," Thomas said. "Just me." Marsh's smile faded. "Then you won't mind if I take a look around?" "I do mind." Marsh's hand drifted toward the gun at his hip, and Thomas didn't move. Section 2. Word count, 1,142 words. The silence stretched like a wire pulled tight. Caleb Marsh sat his horse, hand resting near his gun, eyes locked on Thomas. The wind pushed dust across the yard between them, and somewhere far off, a crow called out, sharp and lonesome. Thomas didn't blink. "You really want to do this?" Marsh asked, his voice low and smooth as oil on water. "Do what?" "Die for a woman who don't even belong to you." "Nobody belongs to anybody," Thomas said. "Not out here." Marsh laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "You're a fool, Merrick, but I'll give you one more chance. Bring her out, and I'll ride off peaceful. You got my word." "Your word don't mean much to me." Marsh's jaw tightened. "Then maybe this will." He drew his gun, not fast but deliberate, and aimed it at Thomas's chest. Thomas didn't move, didn't reach for the rifle leaning against the porch post 5 feet away. He just stood there, arms at his sides, staring Marsh down. "You gonna shoot me in my own yard?" Thomas asked quietly. "If I have to." "Then do it." The words hung in the air, and for a moment Marsh hesitated. Not out of mercy. Thomas could see that, but out of calculation. He was weighing the cost. Killing a man on his own land, in broad daylight, wasn't something even Caleb Marsh could walk away from easily. Behind him, the door creaked open. Anna stepped out onto the porch. "No," Thomas started, but she was already moving. She walked slowly, her head high, eyes on Marsh. "I'm here, Caleb." "You can put the gun down." Marsh's face split into a grin, ugly and triumphant. "There she is." Thomas shifted his weight, positioning himself between them. "Get back inside, Anna." "It's all right," she said softly, her voice steady. "I'll go with him." "Like hell you will." Marsh holstered his gun and dismounted, landing heavy in the dust. He was taller than Thomas, thicker through the shoulders, with hands scarred from work and violence. "See?" Marsh said, looking at Thomas. "She knows where she belongs." Anna descended the porch steps, moving past Thomas. He reached for her arm, but she pulled away gently. "Don't," she whispered. "He'll kill you." "Then he'll kill me," Marsh laughed again. "Listen to your woman, Merrick. Walk away." But Thomas didn't move. Anna stopped a few feet from Marsh, her face pale but composed. "I'll go, but you have to promise me something." Marsh raised an eyebrow. "You ain't in a position to bargain, darling. Promise me you'll leave him alone. He didn't know I was here. He's got nothing to do with this." Marsh glanced at Thomas, then back at Anna. "All right, sure, I promise." He reached for her arm, and the moment his fingers touched her, Thomas moved. He crossed the distance in 3 long strides and drove his fist into Marsh's jaw. Marsh stumbled back, more surprised than hurt, and then his face twisted into something feral. "Bad choice." He swung hard, and Thomas blocked it with his forearm, feeling the impact shudder up to his shoulder. They collided, grappling, boots scraping in the dirt. Marsh was strong, stronger than Thomas had expected, and he drove Thomas backward, slamming him against the porch rail. The wood cracked, and pain shot through Thomas's ribs. "Stop!" Anna screamed. But neither man heard her. Marsh threw another punch, catching Thomas in the side of the head. Light exploded behind Thomas's eyes, and he tasted blood. But he didn't go down. He grabbed Marsh by the front of his shirt and headbutted him, hard and desperate. Marsh roared and staggered back, blood pouring from his nose. For a moment, they stood apart, both breathing hard, circling. "You really want to die for her?" Marsh spat, blood dripping from his chin. "You really want to find out if you can kill me?" Marsh grinned, wiping his face with the back of his hand. "Yeah, I do." He reached for his gun. Thomas lunged for the rifle, and Anna screamed, "Caleb, no!" The gunshot split the air. Thomas hit the ground hard, ears ringing, waiting for the pain. But it didn't come. He looked up. Marsh stood frozen, his gun half drawn, staring at Anna. She was holding a pistol, Thomas's old revolver from the house, aimed straight at Marsh's chest. Her hands were shaking, but her eyes were clear. "Drop it," she said. Marsh laughed, but it was strained now. "You won't shoot me, Anna. You don't have it in you." "I shot the ground next to you," she said, voice trembling but firm. "Next one goes in your chest." Marsh looked at the dirt beside his boot, where a small puff of dust still hung in the air. The bullet had missed him by inches. His smile faded. "Anna, I'm not going back with you, Caleb." Her voice broke, just a little. "I'd rather die out here than spend one more day with you. You ungrateful? Leave." Marsh's face darkened. "You think this is over? You think you can just hide out here with some broken-down rancher and I'll forget?" "I think if you come back," Anna said, steadying the gun, "I'll put the next bullet between your eyes." For a long moment, no one moved. Then Marsh spat into the dirt, shoved his gun back into the holster, and turned toward his horse. "You'll regret this," he said, not looking back. "I already do," Anna whispered. Marsh mounted his horse, yanked the reins hard, and rode off, fast and angry, dust rising in his wake. Anna stood there, the gun still raised, until he was out of sight. Then her legs gave out. Thomas caught her before she hit the ground, taking the gun from her trembling hands. She collapsed against him, shaking, and for the first time since she'd arrived, she let herself cry. Thomas held her there in the yard, his arms around her, feeling the weight of her against his chest, and he didn't let go. Section 3. Word count, 1,096 words. That night, Thomas brought her into the house. He didn't say anything, just held the door open and stepped aside. Anna hesitated on the threshold, her eyes red from crying, then walked in slowly, as if entering a church. The house was small, one room for living, one for sleeping, a kitchen barely big enough for two. But it was clean, and it smelled like wood smoke and coffee. Anna stood in the center of the room, hugging herself. "Sit," Thomas said, nodding toward the table. She sat. He poured her coffee from the pot on the stove, hot and bitter, and set it in front of her. She wrapped her hands around the cup but didn't drink. "You hurt?" he asked. She shook her head. "You sure?" "I'm sure." Thomas sat across from her, his own cup untouched. That was a stupid thing you did. I know. He could have killed you. He could have killed you. Thomas looked at her for a long moment, then sighed and leaned back in his chair. Why'd you do it? Anna finally met his eyes. Because you didn't have to stand up for me. You didn't owe me anything. But you did it anyway. Her voice was quiet. No one's ever done that before. Thomas didn't know what to say to that, so he said nothing. They sat in the silence together, and it wasn't uncomfortable. After a while, Anna took a sip of her coffee, and the weeks that followed were different. Anna no longer slept in the barn. Thomas had offered her the bed, and when she refused, they'd compromised. He'd built a partition in the main room, giving her a corner that was hers. It wasn't much, but it was more than she'd had in years. They fell into a rhythm. She rose before dawn to start the fire and make breakfast. He worked the land, fixing what had been broken, planting what had been neglected. In the evenings, they ate together at the small table, sometimes talking, sometimes not. And slowly something between them began to shift. It started with small things. The way she'd pour his coffee without him asking. The way he'd leave wildflowers on the table after working near the creek. The way their hands would brush when passing plates, and neither would pull away as quickly as before. One evening, 3 weeks after Caleb Marsh had ridden off, Anna was mending one of Thomas's shirts by lamplight when she spoke. I need to tell you something. Thomas looked up from the piece of leather he'd been working. All right. She set the shirt down, her fingers nervous. What I said that first night about giving you a child, I meant it, but not the way you think. Thomas waited. I wasn't trying to bargain, she said quietly. I was trying to give you something I thought you wanted, something I thought would make me worth keeping. Her voice wavered. But that's not how it should be. A child shouldn't be payment. No, Thomas agreed. It shouldn't. Anna looked at him, tears shining in her eyes. I don't know if I can even have children. Caleb and I were married 2 years, and nothing ever... She stopped, swallowing hard. But I said it anyway because I was desperate. And I'm sorry. Thomas set down the leather and leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. You got nothing to apologize for. But I lied. You didn't lie. You made an offer you thought I wanted to hear. He met her eyes. But you were wrong about what I wanted. Anna wiped her cheek. What do you want? Thomas took a breath. This was harder than facing down Marsh had been. I had a wife once, he said slowly, and a daughter. She was 3 years old. Blonde hair, blue eyes, always laughing. His voice roughened. They got sick. Fever swept through town one winter, and I couldn't save them. Anna's hand moved across the table, covering his. I built this place thinking I could bury it, Thomas continued. The grief, the guilt. I thought if I worked hard enough, stayed alone long enough, maybe it'd fade. He looked at her hand on his, small and warm. But it didn't. It just made me hollow. Thomas, when you showed up in that barn, he said, I saw someone else who was hollowed out. Someone running from something they couldn't fight. He turned his hand over, lacing his fingers with hers. I didn't let you stay because of what you offered. I let you stay because for the first time in 15 years, I didn't want to be alone anymore. Anna's tears fell freely now. I don't need you to give me a child, Thomas said. I need you to stay because you want to. Not because you're running, not because you think you owe me, but because this, he gestured at the small house, the life they'd been building, is something worth staying for. Anna stood, came around the table, and knelt beside his chair. She took his face in her hands, and for a moment, they just looked at each other. I want to stay, she whispered. Thomas pulled her close, and she buried her face in his shoulder, his arms wrapping around her like a promise. They stayed like that for a long time, two broken people holding each other together in the lamplight. Spring came early that year. The land turned green, the creek ran full, and the garden Anna had revived bloomed with vegetables and herbs. Thomas repaired the barn, built a new chicken coop, and even started talking about buying cattle again. They were married on a Sunday morning in town with the preacher and 2 witnesses, the shopkeeper and his wife. Anna wore the blue dress she'd mended that first morning, cleaned and pressed, and Thomas wore his father's old suit that still fit if he didn't breathe too deep. It wasn't grand, but it was theirs. As they rode back to the ranch in the wagon, Anna leaned against Thomas's shoulder, and he slipped his arm around her. "You ever regret it?" he asked. "Staying?" Anna looked up at him, a smile playing at her lips. "Every single day." He raised an eyebrow. "I regret that I didn't find you sooner," she said. Thomas laughed, really laughed, for the first time in longer than he could remember. The child came the following winter. Anna had been right about one thing. She didn't know if she could have children. But sometimes life surprises you. It was a boy, small and squalling, with dark hair like his mother and his father's serious eyes. They named him Samuel after Thomas's father. Thomas held him that first night, standing by the window with the baby cradled in his arms, and felt something he thought he'd lost forever. Purpose. Anna watched from the bed, exhausted but smiling. "What are you thinking?" Thomas looked down at his son, this tiny, perfect thing, and then back at his wife. "I'm thinking I broke my own rules," he said, "and I'm glad I did." Anna's smile widened. "Me too." Epilogue. Years later, when Samuel was old enough to ask questions, he'd sit on the porch with his father and say, "Tell me about the day Mama came." And Thomas would lean back in his chair, looking out at the land they'd built together. The expanded barn, the full pastures, the garden that bloomed every spring, and he'd smile. "She knocked on the wrong door," he'd say, "or maybe the right one, depending on how you look at it. And you let her stay?" Thomas would glance through the window, where Anna would be inside making supper, her hair now streaked with gray, her laugh still as bright as that first morning. "No," Thomas would say. "She let me." Samuel wouldn't understand. Not yet, but one day he would. When one day he'd know that sometimes the bravest thing a person can do isn't standing up to danger. It's opening the door when someone knocks. It's breaking your own rules. It's letting yourself be saved. The sun would set over the valley, painting the sky gold and red, and Thomas would sit there with his son beside him, listening to the sound of Anna humming in the kitchen. And he'd know, deep in his bones, that he'd made the right choice. The only choice that mattered, to stop running from the past and to build a future worth staying for.